Why might he not stand and preach, as he saw the dissenters doing sometimes in Lincoln's Inn Fields and other thoroughfares? He could say all that Mr. Hawke had said. Mr. Hawke was a very poor creature in Ernest's eyes now, for he was a Low Churchman, but we should not be above learning from anyone, and surely he could affect his hearers as powerfully as Mr. Hawke had affected him, if he only had the courage to set to work. The people whom he saw preaching in the squares sometimes drew large audiences. He could at any rate preach better than they. Ernest broached this to Pryer, who treated it as something too outrageous to be even thought of. Nothing, he said, could more tend to lower the dignity of the clergy and bring the Church into contempt. His manner was brusque and even rude. Ernest ventured a little mild dissent. He admitted it was not usual, but something at any rate must be done, and that quickly. This was how Wesley and Whitefield had begun that great movement which had kindled religious life in the minds of hundreds of thousands. This was no time to be standing on dignity. It was just because Wesley and Whitefield had done what the Church would not, that they had won men to follow them whom the Church had now lost. Pryer eyed Ernest searchingly, and after a pause said, "I don't know what to make of you, Pontifex. You are at once so very right and so very wrong. I agree with you heartily that something should be done, but it must not be done in a way which experience has shown leads to nothing but fanaticism and dissent. Do you approve of these Wesleyans? Do you hold your ordination vows so cheaply as to think that it does not matter whether the services of the Church are performed in her churches and with all due ceremony or not? If you do, then frankly you had no business to be ordained. If you do not, then remember that one of the first duties of a young deacon is obedience to authority. Neither the Catholic Church nor yet the Church of England allows her clergy to preach in the streets of cities where there is no lack of churches." Ernest felt the force of this, and Pryer saw that he wavered. "We are living," he continued more genially, "in an age of transition, and in a country which, though it has gained much by the Reformation, does not perceive how much it has also lost. You cannot and must not hawk Christ about in the streets as though you were in a heathen country whose inhabitants had never heard of him. The people here in London have had ample warning. Every church they pass is a protest to them against their lives and a call to them to repent. Every church bell they hear is a witness against them. Every one of those whom they meet on Sundays, going to or coming from church, is a warning voice from God. If these countless influences produce no effect upon them, neither will the few transient words which they would hear from you. You are like Dives, and think that if one rose from the dead, they would hear him. Perhaps they might, but then you cannot pretend that you have risen from the dead." Though the last few words were spoken laughingly, and there was a sub-sneer about them which made Ernest wince, but he was quite subdued, and so the conversation ended. It left Ernest, however, not for the first time, consciously dissatisfied with Pryer, and inclined to set his friend's opinion on one side, not openly, but quietly, and without telling Pryer anything about it. End of chapter 56. Recording by Rhonda Fetterman.